Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Sara Anjargolian, Chief of Staff to Armenia's High Commissioner for Diaspora Affairs. She is back in Armenia after a trip to Lebanon with the High Commissioner Zareh Sinanyan following the massive explosion in Beirut. There are more than 200 casualties and thousands wounded. Among the victims, 13 were Armenians. The explosion impacted most Armenian-populated areas in the city, causing substantial damage to the community's businesses, educational, cultural, and media institutions. Thank you, Mrs. Anjargolian, for speaking with us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
You arrived in Beirut on August 9,
Correct.
just days after the explosion. What are your impressions and what did you see when you landed?
Well, my impressions are that of seeing a lot of chaos. Obviously, we had arrived about 5 days after the explosion. What we saw when we arrived was actually our own flight being unloaded. We were the first humanitarian flight from Armenia to assist the Lebanese government with humanitarian aid, after which there were 2 other flights for a total of 3 humanitarian flights from Armenia. But what we saw on the ground was, very multi-layered. Obviously, we saw a lot of damage to buildings. It seemed that there were very, very few buildings that weren't damaged. All of the buildings, particularly the ones near the port, were some were either destructed partially or had completely lost their windows, their doors. There was broken glass everywhere, and there was a general feeling of chaos. Probably much less chaos than the first few days, but because of that cleaning up process was still going on, there was just a lot of people doing a lot of things all over the place. This is the general situation we saw in Beirut, and obviously we also spent a lot of time in the Armenian community, and we have other impressions about the community.
Precisely, I wanted to ask you, the well-known Armenian neighborhood of Burj Hamid was hugely impacted, and my question was, what is going out there actually? Are individuals fending for themselves? Are Armenian community institutions able to organize and lead whatever has to happen next? What is generally the situation there?
So it's actually 2 communities were hard hit in Beirut, Armenian communities I mean. It was Nor Hajan and Burj Hamid. We did get to spend a little bit of time together with the High Commissioner Zareh Sinanyan in Burj Hamid, and we got to spend a lot of time actually just on the ground talking to people. Not only, in other words, our time there was not only vis-a-vis official meetings. We did have a lot of official meetings with religious leaders, with political leaders, but we did get to spend a solid amount of time with community-based organizations, people actually serving Lebanese-Armenians on the ground. What did we see? We saw basically a lot of cleaning up, as I mentioned. It's incredible that much cleaning up had already been done. I mean, Burj Hamid was absolutely clean by the time we got there. All of the glass had been cleaned up, and it seemed like it was more shopkeepers kind of starting to get back into their day-to-day routine. So that's what we saw, and we got a chance to talk to people and just kind of feel the psychological wound, because obviously people living in Lebanon have for decades know all kinds of catastrophes, war, etc. But this one seemed different in that it really, yes, there was a lot of damage and there were deaths and people injured, but the psychological scar on people, particularly, as it relates to us, the Lebanese-Armenian community, seems really, really deep.
So I guess, as you said, you met with the community and you talked with people. What are they saying? What are the biggest anxieties right now for them? You talked about the psychological effect of this.
Right now, most of our conversations, because we were a delegation from Armenia, and I must say, there was incredible pride among the Lebanese-Armenian community that the government, the Republic of Armenia, has sent humanitarian aid to the government of Lebanon. Of the 3 flights, 2 of the flights were as a government-to-government, from the Republic of Armenia to the Lebanese government, and 1 flight was for the Lebanese-Armenian community. There was great pride in the fact that we had so quickly organized and so quickly sent humanitarian aid. That was one feeling we saw. People were thanking us, you know, all over the place, the Lebanese-Armenian community. The second conversation that would very quickly happen with people on the street and also with the community-based organizations was a feeling of people thinking about leaving the country. There was, most conversations were about people asking us about the opportunities for moving to Armenia and what kinds of opportunities there would be if they were to move to Armenia. People would come up to us in the churchyard, people would come up to us in restaurants, people would come up to us on the streets, everywhere we went, young people, old people, you know, all kinds of people. Highly educated people, and just want to have a conversation, try to feel what their life might be like if they moved to Armenia. So those were the conversations we were having.
Precisely, so this is, I mean, the explosion is not the only reason, I guess, why people want to move from Lebanon to Armenia. This is a package of catastrophe going on there. So there is a COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
There is this socioeconomic crisis going on for months.
Yep.
And plus those explosions. So it's a package of dramatic events happening in the country. So people are willing, I guess, to come, but do you have like numbers, or do you feel like there is a wave of Armenians from Lebanon who might come to Armenia?
Look, before the explosion, as you mentioned, people in Lebanon are dealing, continue to deal with, but it was getting worse and worse with an economic collapse. People are not able to access the money in their own bank account. Okay, so this is a major, major issue. And of course, COVID didn't help that situation either. So even before the explosion, our office was receiving dozens, I would say dozens of emails and calls asking people, Lebanese Armenians interested in repatriating, moving to Armenia. After the explosion, just in the 5 days after the explosion, we had several hundred of those calls, emails, Facebook messages, etc., to our office from Lebanese Armenians wanting to move to Armenia. So this is the numbers we can say. We can talk also about the flights, the number of people who came on the flights. Even before the explosion, Middle Eastern Airlines had started to service once-a-week flight Beirut, Lebanon. All together on those flights, as well as the humanitarian flights, which by the way brought people back, from in the last month, approximately 500 Armenians have moved from Lebanon to Armenia, have come. So these are the numbers that we have at our fingertips. But you know, I think maybe I can also mention the recent Armenia Diaspora survey, which is unrelated to our office, but there's a very interesting survey that's about to be launched. But I just want to mention that in 2019, about 500 plus Lebanese Armenians were surveyed. The Armenia Diaspora survey is funded by the Gulbenkian Foundation, and they asked Lebanese Armenians many, many questions. But one of the questions that was asked is, are you planning to stay here or leave Lebanon? And about 58% of people said, in the next 5 years, I would like to leave Lebanon. So this kind of wanting to leave the country was already there, already festering, and certainly the explosion was you know, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I also want to note that there was another question in that survey to these 500 plus Armenians about, if you were to leave, would you consider Armenia as your destination? And approximately 50% of the people surveyed in those 500 said, actually, yes, I'm already making plans to move to Armenia. And another 25% said, I don't have plans, but I would like to move to Armenia. So this is even before this is before COVID, this is before the crisis was starting to happen when this survey was happening, which was fall of 2019. The only reason I give you these numbers is that it's besides the anecdotal experience that I had on the ground, that the High Commissioner had on the ground, this is what the survey data is already showing in terms of the mood of Lebanese Armenians. So
in this case, what is the reason according to that? In the diaspora, I mean, Armenia has always been a place of holiday or the motherland, and you go here you come here for 2 weeks and you stay and you enjoy your identity, your Armenian identity. What happened? What triggered this new movement of this new desire to come and settle in Armenia, according to you, if it's not the socioeconomic situation there, it's not the pandemic, it's not even the explosion. I mean, those accelerated the process, but before, obviously, you say that this idea was already in people's mind. So, yep. According to you, what is the source of this new movement, of this new desire?
Well, look, the economic situation was there when the survey was done. So the economic situation was certainly part of it. And I also think it's the Velvet Revolution. I mean, this is not just Lebanon. In diaspora communities across the globe, we have more and more people who are happy about what's happening in Armenia. They want to be part of it. They see a future here for themselves, for their children. They see opportunity. So I think the combination of Armenia now being an attractive place to move to, an attractive place to live, a livable place, and coupled with what's happening currently in Lebanon is the reason that people are thinking about moving to Armenia.
And talking about those who might want to stay in their country, which is Lebanon, though it's been generations of Armenians living in Lebanon, it's their country too. Do you feel like there is also a will from the community to stay in Lebanon, to keep staying in the land and try to rebuild? And do they think that the Armenian help might help them also to rebuild their own?
Of course, and in fact those were conversations we had with the religious and political leadership about how to rebuild Lebanon. This conversation is not, it's not a one-way conversation. It's really a two-way conversation in that absolutely our Lebanese-Armenian community structures have to be built. Almost all the churches, all the schools were damaged in this explosion. And already we're talking, for example, Armenia Fund is considering putting in some of that funding to rebuild some of those spaces. So obviously there's no question that we need to rebuild our Lebanese-Armenian community structures as well as schools, etc. So it's both ways. We need to rebuild and re-strengthen the Lebanese-Armenian community, but we also need to be ready to welcome those who wish to come to Armenia.
Do they have sufficient funding, according to you, to rebuild everything in Lebanon, like in Beirut?
I can't say. Look, it's a good question. We need to have a number. I don't know what the number is exactly to rebuild all of what has been damaged in the Lebanese-Armenian community. So it's hard for me to say if all the funding is there. There are many efforts all over. You see all kinds of official and unofficial efforts to raise money. So let's see. I mean, there's a needs assessment. It's only been what now 8 days since the explosion. So there's a needs assessment going on right now to understand that. 10 days since the explosion.
Okay, and also let's come back to the fact that people are willing to come to Armenia. So as we know, and as you know, and we all know, Armenia is also amidst a crisis. This the crisis related to the pandemic, but also the country is also facing a weak economy. This is nothing new. And back in 2011, the Syrian war started, and Armenia welcomed around 20,000 Syrian Armenian refugees. Out of those people, many left Armenia for European countries. Armenia ready to welcome Armenians from Lebanon? Is there in fact a plan to integrate them into the social and economic arena?
Well, we're certainly much more prepared than we were when the Syrian-Armenian crisis happened and we had the influx of Syrian Armenians. Definitely, many Lebanese Armenians will come to Armenia and they will leave. We can't stop that. People need to decide whatever they want to do in their lives. But what we can do is create the type of livelihood, the type of life that people would want to stay. So that's what the job of our office is.
How are you going to do?
So before the Lebanese-Armenian crisis, and let's put Lebanon aside. In general, our office has been working, now we've been in existence for a little over a year, on various repatriation packages, repatriation law, integration center. So everything that we do is meant to create an ease of repatriation into the country. Now this is really, really complicated and layered, right? On the one hand, there's lots of things we need to fix in order to make it easier to repatriate. For example, just a few examples. It's overly complicated and difficult to become a citizen of this country. It takes 6 months to become a citizen. Now, recently, it's more like 3 months, but really it should take 1 month to apply for citizenship and get your citizenship. So we've been working on trying to deal with that. The same with bringing your things over, right? Bringing your car over, bringing your furniture over. Again, overly complicated. Nobody understands what piece of paper to fill out, how to fill it out, and because of this we have problems. So we're trying to smooth out the edges of the process of repatriation on the one hand. On the other hand, what we're trying to do is go on the other direction and put a smiling face on repatriation. And so we have already approved in our 2020 and 2021 budget an integration center. So it'll be a one-window place where trained people will be able to take a repatriate's case from beginning to end and deal with anything they need to be dealt with, everything from education to healthcare to job placement, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something we were working on even before the situation with Lebanon. The situation with Lebanon obviously has made us think, so these are more longer term process, structural kinds of things we've been working on. So when Lebanon happened, we also at the moment have spoken very fast to various structures in the government to perhaps have some kind of an offering or a package. But obviously we're not going to do that alone. We're going to do it with many, many, many partners, both partners here as well as partners in the diaspora. So that's a conversation we're having right now. It's only been 48 hours since we came back from Lebanon, and we're going to be soon having something to say for our Lebanese-Armenian counterparts.
Thank you, Mrs. Anjargolian, for your time.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for watching and continue to follow CivilNet.